Greetings everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm your host Captain Rye, and today's video comes to us courtesy of Dear Mr. Frodo. And Dear Mr. Frodo is playing in an underappreciated line here in World of Warships. He's playing in the Tier 7 German destroyer, the Maass, or Maass. As the battle gets underway, it's neighbors, it's domination match mode, and Mr. Frodo is going to go ahead and head towards the sea cap point, since that's where he's spawned closest to. But of course, he could go to either of the cap points because of the way the spawn works out. Now, there is one ship on his team who is headed down to the A cap point, and it is a destroyer. This isn't necessarily a bad thing if you have a friendly destroyer going down there, because they can at the very least spot the enemy team that's down there and put out some harassing shots. If they're smart, they'll know when to contest and ideally when to turn around and just run away. But that's not always the case. In the meantime, we're not going to worry about him, as Mr. Frodo is just about to get into the C cap point. Another friendly destroyer enters the B cap point and starts capturing it. The game is a very heavy DD game, with Mr. Frodo's team having 4 destroyers, and the enemy team technically having a destroyer advantage, having 5. Now, as he gets into the C cap point, you'll notice that the cap has already started going, and the cap progress bar is now stopped because he's stepped on it. This indicates to him that there's an enemy destroyer up here, because he hasn't been able to spot it. The German destroyer line doesn't have the best detection mechanics, or detection ranges, in comparison to other ships, but what it does have is some pretty decent guns. Quick torpedo reloads, good decent torpedoes for their stealth, and it comes with hydroacoustic. So here he's popped the hydroacoustic ability, and he's going to push up here, and he gets a little bit too close to this enemy destroyer because he's being detected by proximity rather than anything else. However, this is going to be good for him because that destroyer is actually paying attention to a friendly destroyer that came up here with him. So, German destroyers hunt really well in packs, because you can get up there and you can get 1 or 2 destroyers together in a pack. The first one can pop their hydro, and the second and the first can go ahead and start nailing these guys. So, second enemy destroyer comes around the island. He's also being detected thanks to the hydro. And as a result of the hydro, Mr. Frodo is able to see the torpedoes headed his way and pulls forward, dodging them. That second destroyer, though, didn't stand a chance. And, well, they did lose one of their destroyers down at the A cap point, because, like I mentioned earlier, he didn't quite know when to just bug out. The enemy team has lost 2 of their destroyers. Not just any 2 of their destroyers, they lost 2 of their sneaky Japanese destroyers. This is going to make life a little bit easier for all of the friendly ships on Mr. Frodo's team, especially the ones that have pushed up towards the sea cap point. Now, because there's 2 of them in the cap, they're capping at a very quick rate, and they actually secure the cap at the same time the enemy team secures the A cap point. But they're currently up on points because they have 2 kills to the enemy's 1. Catapult fighter there, detecting Mr. Frodo as it flies over. He switches on his anti-aircraft. The Maass doesn't have the best anti-aircraft, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you're going to be detected, you're not really in a position where anybody can shoot at you, or you can't necessarily shoot back at them. Go ahead, turn your AA on, cause some damage to it. You never know, you might be able to shoot it down if you get lucky. Now, Mr. Frodo is going to utilize this German destroyer as a torpedo boat, and a lot of people forget that these destroyers have decent torpedoes. And when I say decent, the damage isn't great, and you only get 8 of them, but what you do get is a good range on them compared to your detection range. So he was detected as he came around this island here, but he got his torpedoes off, and they've actually got quite a substantial range, about 8 kilometers versus the detection range of about 6.4. Enemy Oba or Furutaka here, sitting broadside on. Mr. Frodo has the armor piercing loaded, and you can see that the armor piercing is doing a decent job. the armor piercing on German destroyers is actually considered very, very good because it's basically the German AP. So it's a bit heavier and it has a tendency to penetrate more. Now he's shooting at a Colorado over here and he's managing to do some consistent damage, but I would actually switch over to the high explosive. Again, a lot of German destroyer captains don't fully realize that that high explosive is just as good as the American high explosive for setting ships on fire, if not just a little bit better. No, it's not going to cause nearly as much damage as your armor piercing, at least not in the short term, but in the long term, you're going to have fewer ricochets, and you can set those much desired fires, because as battleship players will tell you, they love being set on fire. The smoke screen for German destroyers, though, does last a painfully short time, so you need to be aware of that and get yourself underway. Mr. Frodo is no fool here, so he's stopped firing, he's dropped off detectability, and he gets himself motoring. He's going to use this island as cover to prevent himself from being blasted by enemy ships as he makes his way further and further from his detection range. The enemy team has lost 3 of their 5 destroyers, so they're just down to 2. This bodes very well for Mr. Frodo's team, as I always say. The team that gets the destroyer advantage usually goes on to win. Mr. Frodo takes a big hit there from the Nelson, firing high explosive. Now, incidentally, if the Nelson had been firing armor piercing, he probably would have taken more damage. German destroyers, for whatever reason, and all the infinite wisdom of wargaming, are more susceptible to armor piercing than they are to high explosive. So if you come across one and you're in a battleship and you've got armor piercing loaded, go ahead and just dunk it right into the guy, because it will cause more damage. The penetration values are a little bit better for your AP shells. Mr. Frodo's looking at targets there. He's moved away a bit. Enemy team in the process of capturing the B cap point. And Mr. Frodo manages to connect some torpedoes and takes out that enemy battleship. Now, with that ship killed, his team is currently in the lead with enemy ships killed. And of course, he's now detected and spotted and being fired upon by the remaining 2 enemy destroyers as he pushes up back towards his spawn. This is actually kind of a foolish thing for them to do, because it reveals to the entire friendly team on Mr. Frodo's team exactly where those destroyers are. Mr. Frodo manages to secure yet another kill, taking out that cruiser. And because he's being detected, his engine's been knocked out, he's going to go ahead, pop a smoke screen as he beaches himself. He does have to be careful here because those destroyers were seen, and torpedoes love fishing in smoke for things like damaged torpedo boats. So Mr. Frodo isn't going to stick around here very long. He's not going to repair his engine. As you can see, the repair timer on the engine cooling off. You never know when you're actually going to need to have that repair. And if you're going to get your engine repaired up quickly enough, it's going to work out fine. So there is a smoke screen up there, and Mr. Frodo's got a set of torpedoes off into it. Again, only 8 torpedoes here, so you're not going to get the same level of devastating strike as you would on an American or a Japanese destroyer. But you can cause some significant damage, and if you stagger your launches, depending on what you're shooting at, you can force the enemy to repair and then hit them again and hopefully cause them to flood out. Torpedoes coming in here from somebody. The way they're spread, it almost looks like it's coming in from a British cruiser there. But Storm Surge sees them, gonna avoid them very easily. And that second set of torpedoes he fired off, unfortunately the Gneisenau came around that island, straightened out, and sped up. So those torpedoes are going to miss completely, which is a little disappointing. It would have been a wonderful broadside hit if they had connected, and probably would have caused a significant amount of damage. At this point, though, the enemy team is really in a bad situation. They're down to just 4 ships. They've lost all of their destroyers. Mr. Frodo is the last destroyer alive on his team, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend opening up with your guns, but that Gneisenau is currently distracted, as are the other ships. The enemy is still trying to capture the B cap point, but they are being contested and effectively forced to engage if they want to try and take it. So Mr. Frodo is going to head back down over here towards the B cap point to the other side. His team loses the ship that was contesting at B, but if you look, that cruiser that's there is not got a lot of health here, and he's just a tier 7, so assuming he wants to turn broadside onto some big battleship guns, he should be a fairly easy kill. And if not, if Mr. Frodo can close the distance here and catch him broadside with the armor piercing loaded, he'll actually citadel this guy and should be able to sink him very, very quickly. The enemy team now down to just 3 ships, one of which is in the process of capping B, but you see there, he was just reset, so he's not going to be able to take that capture. And with Mr. Frodo closing in, he's going to have more than just some battleships to deal with. Speaking of battleships, that New Mexico is pushing up there and is engaging with the ships down by his spawn. But because he's engaging with those ships, he's just sailing in a nice straight line. So Mr. Frodo is going to go ahead and get a set of torpedoes off at him. Given how much health he has left, more than 1 torpedo set isn't going to be necessary, and considering he hasn't decided to change directions at all, probably 1 set is going to be enough. In the meantime, there's a full strength battleship over here, and this guy, well, he too is sailing in a nice straight line. So Mr. Frodo goes ahead, he gets a set off at him as well. Now, because he's only got 4 here, as I said, they don't do a lot of damage. Assuming all 4 of them hit, he probably won't kill this ship outright, but he'll cause a lot of damage. Speaking of ships sailing in straight lines, that New Mexico meets his end to a torpedo, which was to be expected given how low health he was. 1 torpedo was definitely going to kill him. Now, Mr. Frodo has switched over to the high explosive, and he's trying desperately to set this Iron Duke on fire. And that Iron Duke does get hit by 3, so 4 probably would have killed him, but due to the spread, only 3 hit. Now that Iron Duke is really, really in a bad situation, because not only is he the last member of his team alive, but he was just flooding and on fire, so he's had to repair that. The next fire that gets set is going to burn, but more importantly, he's got people shooting at him from behind and from the front, and pretty much everybody is shooting at him. So this guy isn't really long for the world, but he's not gonna stop trying. He's definitely gonna keep getting shots out there and try desperately to get as much damage in before the inevitable happens, as Mr. Frodo switches back over to the armor piercing because he's tired of watching his shots shatter. Doesn't get the kill on it, so that's unfortunate, because if he had, it would have been a Kraken Unleashed. Still though, he did almost 100,000 damage in that battle and got 4 kills with 7 torpedo hits. So the torpedoes on the German destroyer lines are absolutely viable. Plus, combine that with the Hydro, and you become a very, very good destroyer hunter. And of course, with a result like this, including that base capture, but the 4 kills mostly, is going to put him at top of the team for XP earned. And if you pay attention to the team lineup there with XP, they actually had an AFK ship in the battle. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. If you liked the video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. If you'd like to get semi-regular channel news and updates, you can do so by liking and following me on Facebook. If you'd like to help support me and the channel, you can do so by becoming my supporter on Patreon. If you've got a replay like this one that you'd like to see featured on my channel, you can send it to my email. And if you'd like to watch me play various games live, you can do so by following me on Twitch. You can find the links for all of those in the video description down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.